Here I have a completely new scene and a new project. One of the interesting questions that I got was, could you add a mesh filter and a renderer to an empty game object and have that rendered? The answer is yes. I'm using Unity 2019.3, by the way. If I add an empty cube into the scene, you'll see that this is nothing more than an empty game object with a transform, with a mesh filter and a renderer. We don't need the box collider. Rendering is extremely complicated, but for now we can think of the mesh filter as being the shape and the mesh renderer being the functionality that renders that shape. So in common sense, you need the shape and the act of drawing it. I'm gonna move this to the side because I want to create an empty game object. I'll call it empty. We have nothing more than an object and a transform. I'm gonna create a script. I'll call it mesh filter test. I'm going to add it to the game object, mesh filter test, go into the script, and I want to add a bunch of components through this script. I want a mesh filter, I'll call it filter. I also want a mesh render, and in the beginning, I want to say add component, which is mesh filter. I also want to add a renderer, add component mesh render. I'm going to save, go back and play. So in the beginning of the game, we're going to add two components to this empty game object. Okay, there you see the components. But right now we cannot render anything because we don't have a shape. Let's add that. I'll have a mesh. I'll call it shape. I'll make it public so we can choose our shape. And under the filter, the mesh will be the shape. Save and go back. For the public variable, I'm going to choose a shape. We have some default shapes in Unity, cube, capsule, other things. I'll add cube for now. And I'm going to play. So we see the shape. And we see another problem here. We don't have a material, even though we have the shape. So let me create that. Material, testing material, name it whatever you want. And I'll make it green. And back in the code, I'm going to need a public material. I'll call it matte. And the renderer should have a material, so assign the public material, save, drag the material in there, and if I play, now we see the material and the shape. If we compare the two cubes, cube and the empty game object, they're the same, so it doesn't really matter how you add the mesh filter and the renderer. As long as the game object has these attributes, you're going to have a cube in the scene. And obviously it's not just a cube. You can choose whatever shape, cylinder, and you'll have a cylinder. You could also have colliders, box collider. I'm going to add it in this code as well. Add the box collider. We can also set up the size of it. I'll make it tall on the Y, 1 on the X and Z. Save. And if I play, we see the box collider that I wrote in the script. I also have a mesh that I downloaded previously from mixamo.com. If I drag this in there, here's the shape of a surface. I'm going to try dragging this into the shape of our game object and play. And as you can see, we see the shape being rendered. This is a simple example, but you can do a lot of other interesting things by adding components, changing the values through your own scripts, and you can get as creative as you want. And that's it for this video. If you have any questions, you can reach me on my Discord server. I have all the links below. And thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.